Wendamin, and we keep it and look after it. I'm the lands manager at Chippewas of Neyaashiinigmiing. We are here today to answer any questions or concerns you may have about the Chippewas and Neyaashiinigmiing land use and capital infrastructure planning process. The Chippewas and Neyaashiinigmiing Unceded First Nation is currently in the process of developing a land use plan and capital infrastructure plan for Neyaashiinigmiing surveyed reserve land. These plans will build on the comprehensive community plan that was completed in 2014. As you can see behind me on the wall, it outlines various goals under the land sector, and completing a land use plan has been one of those goals. So that is why we are here doing this process now. We have hired NEEGAN Burnside and Shared Value Solutions to facilitate the planning process from start to finish. We will start the evening off with an introduction by Corey Jones, who's the president of NEEGAN Burnside Limited, and is also a member of the Chippewas and Neyaashiinigmiing First Nation. Following Mr. Jones's introduction, we will have two presentations to explain the two components of the plan. So please make sure to take note of any questions you may have for the panelists at the end of the presentations. First off, we will have Mitchell Avis, a professional planner from Shared Value Solutions, to make a presentation on the land use plan portion. Mr. Avis specializes in First Nation land use planning and has worked with various First Nations on community planning projects. Following that, we will have Matt Pasnar, a professional environmental engineer and senior project manager for NEEGAN Burnside, making a presentation on the capital infrastructure planning portion. He has assisted many First Nation communities with various projects. After that, after both presentations have been compiled, there will be a question period that will be moderated by Rachel White from Shared Value Solutions. And our panelists will attempt to answer all questions as they're presented. So I am going to put you through to view our brand new video that was compiled by our experts. So without further ado. Ani Bojo.
Ani Bojo.
The future of our community is in our hands.
We need plans for our community's future that take us where we want to go. That's why we started developing a land use plan and capital infrastructure plan.
Neyaashiinigmiing members, leadership, and staff will all have roles in creating our plans because it's important that our direction is one we can all support.
Our land use plan will guide how we use, manage, and make decisions affecting our lands. We will decide what we want to protect and how we want to grow.
Our capital infrastructure plan will help us overcome infrastructure challenges such as housing, roads, water, drainage culverts, and solid waste. These are all unique problems with different solutions. The capital infrastructure plan will help us carry out the land use plan.
When we finish drafting our land use plan and capital infrastructure plans, we'll have a clear vision for where we're headed.
Our plans will prioritize the infrastructure we need for a safe and prosperous community, now and in the future.
We will protect what's important to us, we will create opportunities for our members, and we will do it together.
And we'll do it together. We want to hear from community members like you while we're creating these plans. This ensures they will be plans for everyone. Please take the time to fill out the survey and follow posts about the project on our website, Facebook, and newsletter. Have your say and help build the future of our community. And now we give the floor to Corey Jones.
Thanks, Larissa. Really very honored to be able to address Chippewas and Nawash membership, to present our team. I feel very lucky, having grown up at Nawash for the first 20 years of my life, to be able to continue to come back and do work with the community, to bring engineering and planning expertise to help move the community forward, and to help them plan for the future. In this case, what we've done is we've put together a team of experts to help with the land use plan and the capital infrastructure plan. I'll say that this is a very unique project that we haven't done in any other community, in that Nawash has identified doing these two processes hand in hand at the same time, which allows for a deeper level of planning, a deeper level of community engagement. And I think that it's very forward looking for the membership and the leaders, such as yourself, Larissa, as the lands manager, to make a decision to move forward like this. So I'd like to, as Larissa had already introduced the folks, we do have Shared Value Solutions with us, and they'll start off with talking about the land use plan piece. That tends to start the conversation that we want to have around both of these pieces. And then as we develop that land use plan, we'll be able to work more towards the capital infrastructure plan. And that's where NEEGAN Burnside brings their expertise. So we have, as Larissa mentioned, Mitchell Avis and Rachel White from SVS, Shared Value Solutions, joining us today. And I'm going to, after this, let my project manager and vice president, Matt Pasner, who is one of our infrastructure specialists and experts, talk about the capital infrastructure plan piece. So thank you very much again for having us. And as always, and I can speak for the entirety of my team, we're very honored to be able to work with you and the community on this project.
Thank you.
Great. And so thank you, Marissa, for opening up today. And thank you, Corey, for those great introductory words as well. I think Nawash really has a unique opportunity here that Corey mentioned around doing these plans together. And I think the only thing we might regret at this point is just the fact we can't be community for this meeting and to be there in person, because I know that's often just a way better way of doing these meetings. But we're going to make do, and we'd love your feedback on how this kind of session works. But so my name is Mitchell Avis. I work with a company called Shared Value Solutions. We're an environmental and community development consulting firm, and we're based out of Guelph, Ontario. And we work with First Nation from across Canada, coast to coast to coast. So one thing that you'll sort of notice throughout tonight's presentation is that we might be asking a few questions. We will be asking a few questions in the presentation and in the slides. The idea there is for participants to use the chat function. If you're participating through Zoom, you'll be able to use the chat function to get involved and answer those questions. And we're hoping to get some feedback that way. And as well, as Larissa mentioned, at the end of the presentation, there will be an opportunity, a bit of a moderated question and answer session as well. So some people had submitted some questions ahead of time, but also throughout the presentation, if anyone has any questions that come up, please feel free to post those in the chat as well. And we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So in terms of, I want to start the presentation just by looking at what is land use planning and why land use planning is important for Nawash to be undertaking. And the first one to look at here is around what is land use. So land use planning is a way for First Nations to assert their jurisdiction over their lands. So for centuries, land use planning has been a tool that's been used to oppress First Nations of their lands And now that same tool is being flipped for First Nations to use to assert their own jurisdiction, their sovereignty, and their rights over their lands. Planning is also an ongoing process that is constantly evolving. So the point I want to make here is that planning really is a process. There isn't an end to it necessarily. It's always evolving and changing over time. And that's just, again, part of the process. It develops or helps to develop a community vision and roadmap for how to manage your lands. And that way that they're managed, or the way that the plan outlines that they can be managed, is really meant to reflect your community's values, your priorities, and your goals. So it's meant to describe where Nayawash wants to go as a community and how to get there. And so it's that roadmap to get from point A to point B for the community. And finally, it assists leadership and staff in making informed decisions about uses of land. So it gives leadership direction, what the community wants, and what the community expects when making decisions. So another way of saying that, or another way I've sort of put that often, is it should minimize surprises. The community should, through this process, be coming together to develop that unified vision between the community, leadership, and the lands committee to figure out what that vision, what that plan, and how you get there, so that when those decisions are being made, there aren't any surprises. So you'll see on the question there on this slide. And so in the chat, I'd be curious if people are interested or have something that comes to mind. For you, what does the word planning mean? And I'd be curious whether it's, it could be a word, it could be a description of something, anything that you come to mind, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about that. So post that in the chat if you'd like. So in terms of what is a land use plan, in its simplest form, there's sort of two components to it that I kind of boil down to. And of course, this can really change and evolve depending on the community, but this is one simple way of looking at it. A land use plan will first is identify lands that Nayawash has deemed to be important to protect. And so those could be things like environmental features and environmental lands. It'd be like wetlands and forests and water features. It could also include species at risk, or it could include wildlife and wildlife habitat. It could include cultural elements to protect. That could be anything from powwow grounds to burial sites to places where ceremony occur. And there could be other things that you want to protect. And that's really, as a community, that's where you get to help shape what the land use plan looks like, because it really reflects what you deem as a community to be important for you. The second part that I would say in its simplest form that a land use plan includes is it identifies areas where development and growth should be directed. And that is if your community wants to grow and in different areas. So that could mean places where new houses could be located and could be built. It could be places where new community facilities could be located and built, or parks. Or also often talked about is the idea of economic development or businesses. And so in looking at these two components together, you can identify as a community what you want to protect and what's important to you, but also how you want to grow and how can you grow in a manageable way that meets your needs and your values as a community. And together, those compile or form what is land use planning and the process of planning in general. So in terms of what is a land use plan, and there's certain objectives that are often found in creating a land use plan. And the first one is to develop that vision for land management, for protection and development. So it's, what does that vision look like for the community? And that's one of the core sort of important early pieces that really gets sort of hashed out with the community, is to develop vision, because everything else will flow from that. The second objective there is around empowering community-led processes and plans. So making sure that everything that's contained in those plans, again, that there's no surprises for the nation when the project team or when leadership or staff are presenting or talking about the plan. There shouldn't be surprises because all the elements of it should be coming and be directed from NEYASH members. The third one there is around incorporating local scientific and traditional knowledge. And I think that's a key component in terms of land use planning, especially in a First Nations context, is providing that or braiding together that indigenous knowledge with Western science to come up with a plan that uses the knowledge from both areas in the best possible way to meet your needs and your vision as a community. Fourth is to identify areas for compatible uses, or in the planning world, we often use the term compatible development, which really in a simplified way means making sure that the uses of a similar nature and that have similar impacts are located close together. So making sure that you're not putting, for example, a factory, an industrial factory next to a school. You want to make sure that uses that are compatible and that have similar impacts are located close by, and planning can help make sure that as a community that you're planning for that and adhering to that in your decision-making process. And finally, it empowers NEYASH to be proactive. And that's sort of a theme you'll sort of hear from my side, probably just around planning in general, is that it really allows NEYASH to be proactive in your decision-making rather than reactive on sort of a project-by-project basis. So why do a land use plan? And in terms of why NEYASH would want to do a use plan, for first reason, it's to help better understand what's important to NEYASH. So understanding what those values and goals are as a community, and for the community to have a process that they can actually come together as a community to develop those together. It can reinforce cultural identity. So from a cultural standpoint, from a language standpoint, from laws standpoint, all those elements can be reflected and incorporated in the land use plan to make sure that it reflects your community values and your culture. Membership directs the future of the community, and that's really important. And what we've heard from our initial conversations with leadership, especially and staff, around really wanting to make sure that plan is something that the membership, leadership, and the lands committee can all agree on a path forward and a unified vision in that sense. And similarly, it's a community mandate for leadership. So it really provides leadership with that direction around what the community wants and how to get there. And it's that roadmap again. And also it can help facilitate relationships with other nations, neighbors, and businesses. So for example, if business development or economic development were something that NEYASH wished to pursue, and you wish to encourage non-members to maybe lease those lands or pursue business opportunities, a land use plan is something that you can use as a tool to help showcase those businesses where it could occur on the land, where you've sort of identified it could occur. So it can be used as a relationship tool with other nations, neighbors, and businesses. So I wanted to spend a moment here, and got graphics to go along with it, but just discuss about what's in a land use plan. And it can take a variety of different forms. And again, it'll be made to meet NEYASH's needs and goals, and through discussions like tonight, but also one-on-one discussions or further community engagement about what's going to be useful for NEYASH and how can it be organized in a way that is useful for NEYASH. From a staff level, from a decision-making level, and from a general community level as well. So when we look at land use planning and what the graphics are meant to sort of showcase there, is that land use plans, they can be complex and comprehensive. So they can look at a wide range of factors, everything from the type of soil, landforms, where the wetlands are, where the forests are, water bodies like lakes and rivers and streams, floodplains, places known to flood or that are low-lying lands that could flood and pose a risk. And you also layer it on with other things like roads and infrastructure, where existing housing is. And you start to get a bit more of a picture around different elements of the land. And included in that, I think is really important that we touched on earlier, is just around adding in or including areas of cultural significance. So knowing through traditional knowledge and through gaining insight of the local community, identifying those areas that are really important to the community and making sure that those are included within the, not just the environmental factor, but that those cultural areas have a key place as well in the decision making and land use process. And so together, this all provides a picture of really what's important to protect. And so where development, if Neyaashiinigmiing does want certain types of development, where that can be directed. And it's by layering all these levels together that you start to sort of see that clearer picture and that sort of 30,000 foot level bird's eye view of how the community can grow and what it wants to protect. So in terms of the project that we're here to discuss tonight and Neyaashiinigmiing and your land use plan, it's really the focus from we've been given to focus on from a starting point is really on your surveyed reserve lands, on the Cape Croker hunting grounds, and there's also a parcel of land, about 69 acres, that is currently going through the additions to reserve process. And they're meant to be the main focus or the main scope for this project, but there's many other lands that have been identified as well that will be considered throughout the process, and those include lands like the Fishing Islands and Bear Island, amongst many others. So in terms of throughout the process, we'll build on the things that I've talked about tonight, but especially looking at things like the environment, looking at things like species at risk that have come up already, and as well as the cultural use and cultural sites of importance. And I also want to just highlight that bottom point there. Anything else you think is important? Because that is really, I think, what the focus can be on in terms of how this project can really be focused and specialized for Neyaashiinigmiing, what is important for you. So in terms of the question for the chat on this slide, I'd be curious if people want to add in or type in some answers around what's the #1 issue you want addressed. And we won't police you in terms of if you put more than one. I would say if you can put what you think in there is what are the #1 issue or what are the main issues that come to mind that you want addressed through the land use plan. So feel free to post that in the chat. And so I just want to finish off my part just right now, just around looking at the overall project, because I just want to highlight this will be sort of the first time that a lot of people in the community are probably hearing about the project, about shared value solutions, working with NEEGAN Burnside on this project, and sort of the first FaceTime, quote unquote FaceTime, I guess we'll call this that, but where you're able to sort of meet us virtually and sort of so we can introduce the project. So we are just right at the beginning. We started the project just before Christmas. We kicked it off with Neyaashiinigmiing staff and leadership. So it is very early on. We're hoping to work the next number of months and have a land use plan done by the summer. And so there will be many different opportunities, community engagement throughout the duration of the project. And so we do realize, given the reality with COVID, that we have to be creative and innovative with our community engagement and the approach. It's different, as I mentioned before. We'd love to have done this in person, and we hope that maybe that will be a possibility at some point. But we'd also have feedback from people just around how tonight's video presentation is working for you, and if you have any other ideas around how to do better in the future. And so with that, I'll speak a little later just around how you can get involved in the project. But I'm going to pass it over now to Matt from NEEGAN Burnside, who's going to speak to the capital infrastructure plan portion of the project.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. And it's, as Corey mentioned, it's an honor to be with you guys for this important project. And as Mitchell indicated, we'd like to hopefully do this in person sometime, and look forward to hearing from the community members as we go through this important project. So the capital infrastructure plan is the second piece to the project. As Mitchell indicated earlier, the land use plan is going to focus more on the land and looking at it from generally of where we could start to put different pieces of use. So what could be used for housing, what can be used for community infrastructure, what can be used for community buildings and other recreational projects and hunting grounds, etc. The infrastructure plan builds on that and starts to come up with a more detailed plan for infrastructure. And so the first thing we should talk about is, what is infrastructure? So infrastructure basically is the systems that help a community run or function. So basically infrastructure could be anything from transportation systems like roads, walking trails, things like that. Communication networks. So a lot more is being the telephone, internet, television, etc. Of course, it's water. So water, drinking water systems, sewage systems or septic systems to treat the sewage, solid waste management, so ways to handle the solid waste and recycling materials that the community may produce, and of course the electrical systems to support everything. So basically it's the primary systems or functions that a community needs to help keep the community running and growing going forward. So I think that we are, your community is very fortunate that you guys, you as a community, your chief and council have had the wisdom to do these two plans together, because a lot of times I've been to a lot of communities myself. I've actually visited about over 300 of them, coast to coast to coast, this over the last 15, 20 years. And a lot of communities don't take the time to sit down and do these critical plans. These plans are put together because it allows a community to really know where they're going for the next 20 years and to be forward thinking. We know that staff members and chief and council change through time. This is a longer document that helps guide everybody in that role, from community members to staff to those who help fund projects from outside the community, to implement the vision of the community, and sitting down, getting it right, and coming up with something that the majority of the community agrees upon, and then figuring out how to implement that plan is a good tool that I find that the communities that do that seem to move forward a lot smoother than communities that don't have these two types of plans put into place. So what is a capital infrastructure plan? So there's some important objectives that we need to cover. So it has to address the infrastructure challenges that your community currently has, and then start to develop a systematic approach to grow or develop your community and make sure it shows how you'll provide those critical services that each and every community should have to support that type of growth. We know that a lot of the communities are growing, and we need to be able to make sure that the infrastructure is there to support it, because you don't want your community growing and not have that infrastructure there, like drinking water systems or being able to manage the sewage, etc. It has to incorporate both local knowledge, traditional knowledge, and of course the scientific knowledge to find the right solutions, to provide the right services that are unique to your community, not what just will work anywhere, but what is the right solution for Nayawash. It has to identify major capital infrastructure projects and come up with a plan that's phased over the 20 years to make sure that you have the right infrastructure in place to be able to support any future growth. So, for example, you need to have the roads and you need to have the capacity in the water system to be able in place before you can start to build additional homes. Because if you put the homes in first, it makes it harder to build them because you don't have road access to them, and you may have to wait to connect them up to a water system, for example. So identifying those capital infrastructure projects in the plan, having it kind of phased out so that way it's implemented at the right time, and also identifies rough cost, so that way those responsible in the community, chief council staff, can look for the funding required to do that. And it empowers Nawash, your community, to be proactive, to always be ahead of the game, and being able to apply to those funding programs that are there with a plan, because those who have a plan seem to get the funding a lot smoother, a lot more efficiently and quicker than those that don't. So one of the things we'd like you to do is in the chat, as you see at the side there, is what types of infrastructure do you think your community needs? We really want to hear from you. This is your community, and we're here to help guide you through the process using the knowledge and skills that we have. But in the end, it is your community, and we want to make sure that it is the right fit for Nawash. So throughout this entire project, you'll be hearing from our entire team through some of the engagement sessions that Mitchell will talk about in a little bit. And we want you to get involved and get your neighbors, your cousins, aunts, uncles, etc. involved, and let us know what you as a community would like to see. So if you could put that in the chat for tonight, and feel free to reach out at any time at any of these engagement sessions as we go forward. So what is a capital infrastructure plan? So we could boil it down to something pretty simple. So the plan basically will identify where future residential lots will be for people to live in as your community grows, and the non-residential buildings. So those will be community buildings that you may require, recreational facilities, and anything else that the community comes up with during this planning process. Where are we going to put those? And then how are we going to service them? How are we going to provide them drinking water? How are we going to handle the sewage that comes out of it? Where are we going to handle the solid waste as your community grows? How are we going to implement the roads and to what standard? And how are we going to handle the drainage? So we handle any flooding issues that we seem to see a little bit more often due to climate change and other issues. And how are we going to provide power, telecommunications, etc.? So that's basically what it's going to show. So why do we need to do it? A capital infrastructure plan is something you may be thinking. And the reason is it'll help the community to establish both what you need right now and what you're going to need over the next 5, 10, 20 years in terms of goals and objectives for your future development, and what major capital projects are going to get you guys to that those goals and the infrastructure to support that. It's going to provide recommendations based on technically sound planning and engineering principles, and take into account the best wishes and knowledge of your community. We're going to use all the best practices that are out there for engineering to make sure that we come up with what's the right solution to provide those services that we need, and not just what is cookie cutter. It's going to help guide the decision making and meeting the collective long-term goals of your community, to make sure that there's a plan that hopefully everyone can follow, that everyone agrees to. So what will be in this capital infrastructure plan? So we're going to highlight the goals and objectives that the community comes up with. We're going to identify the existing conditions that are in the community. So basically identify the existing infrastructure that you have and what state it's in, and when we think it may need major repairs or replacement. It will highlight what design criteria we believe that the community is going to need in the future. So looking at both federal and provincial requirements, and looking at which is the most stringent, and any best practices or things that we think is going to happen in the next 20 years based on industry. It's going to have maps showing where all the future residential lots, community buildings, roads, and infrastructure is going to be placed. So that way we can all visually see it and can work towards a common goal. It's also going to have a phasing plan in it that'll just help identify how to build this plan in a step-by-step manner, and will help guide staff and council towards that. So your capital infrastructure plan is going to use that land use plan information that Mitchell and the SVS team that's working with us to come up with where residential lot layouts are going to be planned for, and the location of all those non-residential buildings that hopefully will come up during that land use plan. We will then identify all the infrastructure, like I said, over the next 20 years, and how it's going to be routed through the community to get to there, and to be able to support those buildings and get houses that we will be planning for. It's going to take into consideration the condition and age of your existing infrastructure, the existing and future needs of your community, the engineering guidelines and practices, as I mentioned earlier, level of service standards to qualify for funding, of course, but that won't be just the standard. We'll be going beyond that, and anything else that you guys as a community will think is important. So one of the things we'd like you to answer in the chat is, do you feel like your existing infrastructure is adequate? And if it isn't, what type of infrastructure that you have right now that's existing do you think needs upgrading or replacement? If you could provide that, that would be very helpful for us. So to complete the plan, we've got these 4 phases, at least the infrastructure plan, these 4 phases that we're going to follow. The first one is, as you can see on the screen, where are we now? So basically, it's taking an inventory of the existing community, of the infrastructure, the housing, and its condition right now, just to be able to identify it and figure out what may be deficient. From there, we will move to the next phase, which is where should we be going? And in that one, we are going to project out how fast and how big your community is going to grow from a population standpoint. And then from there, start to figure out, well, how many homes do we think we're going to need in the community? And how many additional community buildings do we think we're going to need? And what infrastructure are we going to require to get there? And it will also identify all of the design criteria from an engineering perspective that we think we're going to have to meet, looking at both provincial, federal standards, as I mentioned earlier. When we move to phase 3, that's how do we get there? So we kind of know now where the homes are going. We know where community buildings are going. We know what types of land, or how we want to use the land. We also know any trails or different recreational facilities and things that the community would like, hopefully at this stage of the project. So now we need to figure out, well, how are we going to build it? How are we going to support that growth? How are we going to support the community's vision 20 years from now with infrastructure? So that's basically then looking at different options for providing potable water and different options to handle the sewage, road designs, telecommunications, etc. And that's how do we get there, phase 3. And finally, at the end of this capital infrastructure plan is phase 4, is issuing the final report and identifying what did we as a collective group come up with. And that will highlight all of the background and detailed calculations and things we did and analysis, but present specifically, here's the plan, here's what the vision of the Nawash community is, and this is how we think is the best phased way to reach there. So that way, it should be the guiding vision on implementing infrastructure for the community. So this will be done through 3 reports. So the interim report will be done through phase 1. Our draft report will be done through phase 2 and 3, and our final report will be in phase 4. And as we go through community engagement sessions during the capital infrastructure plan process, we're going to highlight and have this slide and basically show you where we're at in the project. So at least you can have a quick visual representation or idea of where we're at any time. So that gives you a quick highlight on the capital infrastructure plan. And as I've mentioned, we look forward to hearing from you. We hope to see you in person, and we have a lot of sessions that Mitchell will talk about here on how you can get involved and engaged. And we all want to hear at both parts, the land use and infrastructure plan, from the community.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I just want to highlight, just to sort of build off some of the points I was making around the idea that everybody sitting around their screens joining us for this presentation tonight, everybody is an expert in some capacity of something. And for the Nawash community members especially, you're the experts in your own community. And so really to build this plan, it really requires everybody coming together to work and identify how you want these plans to look and what you want them to accomplish. So I really just want to highlight the fact that we're hoping throughout this project that there will be several opportunities for NEYAASH community members to engage with the project team, with the materials, be able to share stories, provide ideas, feedback, and all the like throughout the project. So we wanted just to highlight a couple of the key ways that you can get involved more immediately in the shorter term. So understand that this video meeting tonight is going to be live streamed, I think, simultaneously on YouTube and recorded as well. So if you've got any family members, friends, anyone else you talk to in the community that wasn't able to make it tonight, I would really encourage you to sort of share what you learned and how they can go about participating as well. Because I think there will be opportunities to sort of view this afterwards, but also to participate in other ways. Right now, you'll notice if you go onto the NEYAASH website, we do have a survey available on there. We've got it up there. There's a chance for up to 10 $25 gift cards. If you fill it out, you'll be eligible for a draw for those. So a bit of an incentive. But this is one of the first surveys that will occur, and there will be a couple that will be done throughout the course of the project to sort of focus on different areas and different topics. But this first one is more of a general one. So building on some of the questions that we were asking you in the chat tonight, as well as with some of the materials. So go onto the NEYAASH website and fill out the survey. The second one is we're working right now with staff to do some knowledge holder interviews. So those are ongoing this week and in the coming weeks to really sort of spend some more time one-on-one to identify what those issues are and ask some particular questions of people who are key knowledge holders in the community. The third one there, keep an eye out. We're looking based on the current schedule around March 2021 to be doing some specific focus groups with the community to do more of an innovative mapping exercise, which sort of combines land use and traditional knowledge. And this will help sort of form one of those base layers or that critical piece of information for the community to go along with other environmental aspects and roads and infrastructure and housing plans and all that kind of stuff to really form how that community plan can look. So that's a neat exercise. It's a mapping exercise we can either do in person or virtually with the community, and it's usually a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for invitations to participate in that. And then in terms of community meetings, beyond that, the mapping exercise, the next community meeting and the work plan is scheduled to take place in April of 2021. So again, keep an eye out for the invite and notices to participate in that. And so before I just pass it over to Rachel, I just want to sort of say that follow for updates on the NEYAASH website and on the Facebook page and the community contact. You can reach out to Larissa if you have any questions, comments, or anything else, input, whatever it happens to be, ideas that you want to share with her that she can either pass on to us or to the leadership and everyone else involved in the project. So I'll pass it over to Rachel to do the question and answer session.
Thank you, Mitchell. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today and very excited to see so much action in the chat. So thank you for those who have contributed so far. And I have some questions that were submitted prior to the meeting. So my role here will be to pull out questions from the chat and ask our panelists. So there will be some questions that would naturally fall under the land use plan or the capital infrastructure plan, but other questions that are general. So to the other panelists, if you could, I might ask you directly, or please just step forward when you have an answer. Okay, so we've gotten multiple questions about a process for members who would like to build their own home or cottage on the reserve. So the questions are around that, and can land be allocated for this purpose to encourage a broader membership population? And if so, what is the selection process of the various areas where houses could be built? Maybe Mitch, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that. Excuse me. Yeah, great question. I think very detailed and excellent. A great one to lead off with. I think sort of the last question that you're asking as part of that is like, can there be a selection of various areas to build upon? That I think that helps us answer sort of the first two. So currently, like, there isn't really a plan for how and where members can build homes in a larger sense for the entire community. And so we understand that right now there is a current moratorium on certificates of possession until a land use plan is created. And we also recognize that the majority or a very large portion of Nawash members live off reserve as well. And so one of the big challenges with on-reserve populations is that it's really driven by the number of homes available, not necessarily, it's not necessarily driven by the number of people who actually want to live there, because usually it's a long waiting list for homes. Usually a lot more people want to live there than there might actually be homes available. So that really demonstrates demand. And so I think this is a really good question. I would say, in short, I don't necessarily have an answer tonight. I think this is a topic that we're hearing from multiple different people in multiple different areas. And so I think it's really going to be a key driver in the whole land use planning process to really help Nawash figure out what that process looks like and to help identify where those key building lands can be. So to the person who asked that question, if you've got ideas around those things, we'd love to hear those throughout this process. So feel free to reach out again, because I think this is definitely the opportunity to do that.
Great, and just giving the opportunity to Corey and Matt to chime in or give me a thumbs up if you're okay. No thumbs up, but I'll move on. Okay, so the next question we have is related to infrastructure. So this will be towards Corey and Matt. So will there be an industrial area that members can build on or lease for businesses? And will there be taxes or similar applied to businesses who make use of Nawash infrastructure? For example, water, roads, or garbage?
So in terms of industrial area, we see that in a lot of community plans. So if that's something that the Nawash community is wanting, an area for some economic development, business activity, it is something that I think during the land use plan period, an area could be identified for in the proper infrastructure plan for the infrastructure plan. In regards to the tax question, that one will have to probably be discussed as a community with the chief and council, and something that will have to be looked at through the process, and is more a political thing than a land use and infrastructure plan part.
Yeah, I'd add to that, Matt, that some of that gets into policy development, which is not necessarily where we're going to start with this. The idea is to find out first what the people in the community feel is needed, and then, as Mitchell had noted, try to figure out how best to identify lands that will allow for the most efficient and the best protections for the environment. Take all of that into account as the development takes place in the future.
Thank you, Matt and Corey. Okay, so the next question is related to authority over the lands. So the question is, what authorities are going to be linked to the environment, the protections of the environment and cultural areas, as values are associated to key areas like water or housing standards? So for instance, provincial and federal laws can change when these agencies are pushing for access. So I'm wondering if maybe Mitch, you could start us off with an initial answer to this question.
Yeah, just to reflect, Rachel, just to make sure I got it clearly. Sort of, it's asking just around which laws kind of apply for development on reserve.
Correct.
That's sort of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I would say there's certain laws, especially like things like the Species at Risk Act. That's a federal law, and that applies on reserve. And whether you're a community that, for Nayawash, has not gone down the First Nation Land Management Act route yet, or at this point, but even if you go down that route or not, like that kind of act still applies. So there are still certain elements of environmental protection that do apply. Now, that doesn't mean that Nayawash can't create your own laws and assert your own jurisdiction over certain aspects. So things, especially like housing, you definitely see a lot of First Nations develop their own laws and rules around, and even with regards to environmental protection and different aspects of that. A lot of First Nations even want to go above and beyond what the protections are at a federal and provincial level as well. So through a land use plan, are able to identify sort of what some of those priorities are, and you could create some of the outlines and frameworks for what those rules could be, or what those areas are that you want to go to create your own laws and rules for, or that you want to create your own laws and rules for, or create more policies within the plan to address those. So there are lots of options. And if you got specific ideas in mind, I think, Rachel, you listed off a couple there for the environment and housing, but if there's ideas, we'd love to hear those as well and see how we can weave those into the plan to assert Nawash's jurisdiction over those.
Thank you, Mitch. Okay, so this next question I think is related to Corey and Matt. So I wonder if building semis or townhomes is feasible to maximize land use.
I can take that one, Matt. Definitely, if you're looking to expand, in this case, residential opportunities, and understanding that currently there's a limitation on service lots within the community, definitely something such as townhomes or attached homes, row housing, or small apartment buildings, it definitely helps maximize land that you may have available. But what we'd like to also do as part of this is better understand if people are interested in living in those types of units, because we don't want to recommend that you build high density housing and then have people concerned about having to live in conditions that they really don't feel comfortable in. So part of what we have to do as we discuss this is better understand what the wants of the community are, as well as the needs in regards to such things as housing opportunities.
Great, thank you. We have two questions regarding how to get involved in the project. So one is regarding if members know of technologies that have been developed and kinds of developments that are nature friendly, that would help inform the process. How could that get those they get consideration? And then another question that's related to involvement would be who will be determining who are interviewed for the Knowledge Keeper interviews?
Yeah, so I can take those. So the first one I think was around sort of like building technologies and different techniques there, and how to get that sort of involved in the plan. I'd love to hear more about what those are and what working on and what you've experienced or seen, because yeah, I love seeing those different innovations, and I think that's what really makes communities unique and special, and having those different building techniques. So that type of thing can totally be considered and included as part of a plan. You're definitely seeing that shift in terms of building technologies and what those look like, and especially becoming more localized in terms of materials and making sure that energy efficiency and all those different sort of green technologies and maybe more of those buzzwords that get thrown around right now. But so yeah, get in touch with Larissa, and we'd love to chat more about what those ideas are. With regards to, sorry, I forgot the second one, Rachel, but it was how to get it, or the knowledge holder one. Maybe I'll pass that one over to Larissa if I think I just saw her on mute.
That's fine. So what we've been doing is we've been corresponding amongst ourselves to try and come up with a roster of people that we can interview. In our minds, we had it so that we could possibly touch different types of land users, some of them being youth, and some of them being seniors, some of them being hunters and trappers, and some of them being people interested in agriculture. So we're still in the process. That process is not done. So we're still in the brainstorming stages of coming up with some of those names. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you. So I see that we're just at 8 o'clock. So maybe one more question before closing remarks. So this question has come up multiple times regarding will there be a plan for Hope Bay?
I might be.
Larissa, go ahead, Corey. I was going to say it's the Zoom stare off.
Yeah, no. And, I mean, I can offer a little bit there, but first and foremost is, to separate Hope Bay out from the rest of the lands for what we're doing right now is perhaps a little bit ahead of where we're going with a land use plan. I understand that there was the cottages there. It is currently surveyed out into individual lots. But what we'll be doing in the land use plan is high level, as Mitchell mentioned before, as far as how that development, if it is decided that that would be a good idea for development. And again, that's input that has to come from the community and the consultation and engagement process that we are going to do with you. If that's decided that they would like to see some sort of economic development there, then how exactly that proceeds from a detailed perspective, that's beyond what we'll be doing with the land use plan. That has to go back to membership and the leadership to decide how exactly that's going to unfold. So that's my take on it.
Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for submitting your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all of them, but we'll find a way to relay the information to you after this meeting. So I'll just pass it over to Larissa for some closing remarks.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying thank you to everybody that came tonight to, shared some of their time with us. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Mitchell and Rachel and Corey and Jeremy, for coming and answering some of the questions that our community members have for this process. I'm sure questions are going to keep coming up through the process, and we're going to keep trying to answer them all. So keep abreast of the process. It's on the NEWASH website. In regards to the initial survey, if you know of any of the seniors that don't have the capabilities of accessing the survey online, have them call me and I'll go and put a paper copy in their mailbox, or I'll email it for them. Okay. So take care. I just thank everybody for coming. This is going to be quite the process. And I'm just confident that the community is going to be there right beside us through it all and assist